Alright, so my final video of the year. 2018 has been rough, but I finally get to do my top 10 best books that I've read of 2018. And I don't think I've made this clear in the other videos. And I'll be sure to put this in the description of those. These are not books that have been published in 2018. These are books that I have read and reviewed for this channel. So, before we get into that, obviously, we do have some honorable mentions. Alright, so Maze Runner. I already talked at length about this in my top 5 surprising books of 2018, so I'm not going to go any further than to say that it started out rough, but the ending was built so masterfully, or built up so well, that I found myself really getting into it towards the end. It just took a little bit before I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is good. His Personal Agenda. This is another romance that I read this year that was actually kind of mature. Like, the characters weren't whiny little cunts, and you actually kind of gave a shit about the relationship. It had a lot of problems, a lot of story elements that were kind of out of whack, and character motivations that didn't make any sense. But for what it was, I enjoyed it. Filthy Rich by Verna de Paul. Again, this is a book that I went into detail with in my surprising books list. So if you're really interested, either watch the review or watch that list. But it was a smut book that had quite a lot of substance to it, and I was very appreciative of that. A lot of sex. A lot of very corny sex dialogue, but what are you gonna do? From a Buick 8. A really decent Stephen King book. Okay, I say decent like it's bad. It's good. I ended up giving it like a B+. The story itself was pretty good. You gave a shit about the characters. There were some framing issues. King had it to where every single character told their own part of the story, and it would jump to them randomly throughout the book. And different narrative structures, I guess is the term you would use. And it's like, okay, that's cool. I like the idea of that, but it just wasn't executed the best. And finally, Indigo. Indigo, I read this when I was a kid, alright? And because of that, I reread it this year. It's kind of a nostalgic thing to review because I ran out of ideas for 1 week. But because I already read it in a year prior, it wasn't eligible for the list. I ended up giving it a B+ with a high recommendation, despite finding it a little watered down. I feel like more could have been embellished when it came to like characters and relationships between the characters. It was still a great book. It's a great kids book. It's from the same author that wrote Aquamarine. So, if you're familiar with that and you like Aquamarine, you might just like Indigo. With all that out of the way, let's get down to the top 10. Number 10. One White Rose. A perfectly good romance. That's it. That's basically what it is. Story of a woman who ends up giving birth, and this guy is sworn to protect her, and there's this group of thugs that are running this town, and they're threatening her safety and her son's safety, and the only reason it's really on the list is that good romance was so far from reach this year that this simple good romance was enough for me to go, yeah, that's one of the better ones. Number 9. The Haven. So, when I did my top 10 worst, I got a little pissed off when talking about A Bouquet for Iris. And I made the claim that I find Christianity to be a cult. I'm not gonna say all religions all over are cults. What I meant was that this certain sects of Christianity that support ideas of hatred, misogyny, manipulating minorities, things that were in A Bouquet for Iris and Silent Night, Deadly Night. The Haven, however, is a fantastic book. It was the first book on this channel to receive the B+ with the high recommendation. Reason being is the plot of the story is actually kind of flawed. Basically, the entire plot could have been fixed with a 2-second conversation, but the author milked it to try and push the story along, which I didn't like. However, it's fantastic. Love the characters, love the main lead. There's even one part where the main character's sister gets into a drag race with a kid in Amish buggies. Like an Amish buggy drag race. I had no idea I wanted that in a book, but after I read that, I'm like, yeah, I'm checking that off my bucket list. I clearly needed an Amish buggy drag race at some point in my reading career, so check. The one thing that I do love the most about this book is, yes, it's about God. It talks a lot at length about God, but it talks about God's love, forgiveness, and the love that's in forgiveness. There's even one part where the main lead, which I hate when I say that, because some books I remember the characters, other books I don't. And it doesn't matter how much I loved them or hated them. It just depends on what my brain wants to remember. But the female lead, she's helping this really crotchety bitch who was gossiping about her and lying about her. She finds out that this woman, the reason she's so angry is that her daughter left the Amish community. Because she left, she was cut off. And she's holding in a lot of anger and resentment. And she has to talk to this woman and say, you have every right to be upset, but you have to learn to love and forgive. There's a lot of other things too, a lot of little subplots here and there. The relationship, the little love triangle that forms, which I didn't say this in the review, but so there's this guy that comes into the Amish community to work as a farmhand. And then there's this guy, Gideon. His name was Gideon. So it was Will, Gideon, and then the female lead. She isn't really interested in either romantically. She's pissed at Gideon because he believed all the lies about her, because she comes back with a baby that was abandoned. And everyone's, oh, she had the baby, she's a whore. And it's like, no, maybe you guys should ask me before you just spread rumors. But there's this little love triangle going on because Gideon believed the lies about her, so she's pissed at him. And she likes Will, but when he goes in to kiss her, she's just like, okay, don't do that again. But there's one part where Gideon and Will get into a fist fight. And so Amos, the main lead's father, is watching this, and the lead's sister goes up to their dad, and he's like, what is that, or what's going on? And Amos goes, I believe it's called a love triangle. I don't know why I found that so funny, but it was funny. It was very self-aware. The author's like, yeah, I'm doing a love triangle, but it ended rather well. It wasn't a complete, just melodramatic sob fest, and it could have been, but the author restrained herself, and it made for a really good book. I wish more Christian fiction was like this. I'd probably read more of it otherwise. Number 8. Horrible Harry Cracks the Code. So, Maddie the Fun and Games Fairy was on my dishonorable mentions list for the top 10 worst, because I felt like it talked down to children. There are certain book series, like Ramona Quimby and Horrible Harry and... what else? Any of the Dr. Seuss books, really, that treat children like smart, intelligent creatures that can learn. And Horrible Harry Cracks the Code is a very simple book about Harry trying to figure out who's going to win a contest. And they use something called the Fibonacci sequence, which I had no fucking idea existed. It's like, this kid's book taught me something new, and I haven't been in school for, 7 years, 8 years? And that's basically it. You have characters that are so relatable. Like, we all have had characters like the ones in this book in our elementary school classes. The tattletale, the kid that means well, but he's really freaking annoying, the foreign exchange student, the kid that likes weird crap, but he's a good kid at heart. We all have those characters. The only character I can think of in the Horrible Harry series that occasionally becomes a little bit of a Gary Stew is Doug, because Doug is usually the narrator who's telling the story to us, but even then there are plenty of books where he too gets fleshed out. Regardless, fantastic kids book. I love Horrible Harry. I had a lot of fun reading it. It's simple and easy to grasp, so the Horrible Harry series is a great series to teach children how to read, but even as an adult who has a lot of nostalgic love for this series, I just loved reading this book. It took me back. It really did. Number 7. Gwen DS Button Box by Stephen King and Richard Chismar. I realize now that sometimes I say the author's names and sometimes I don't. Oh well. I bought this book at Walmart because I noticed it had a co-author. And all I'm saying is Stephen King I'm not saying he's never had one. That was a double negative. I know he wrote a book with his son Owen and with Peter Straub at one point. Straub. So it's not a new thing, but it's not a common thing. So when I see it, I'm like, I wonder how well King works with other writers. And now I just want to see a Nora Roberts and Stephen King collaboration. I don't know how that would turn out, but it would be fabulous no matter how good or bad it was, so. But Gwen DS Button Box revolves around Gwendy, and this meets this guy who gives her this strange box, and he's like, you can press these buttons and get chocolates and coins out of it. Whatever you do, don't press this button. It's a short book. It's a novella, I believe, and it takes this short book and it fleshes out so much. You'd think looking at it, I'm like, oh, this isn't gonna tell me what I need to know, but no, it does. The chapters are short, but Gwendy as a character, you grow to love her. You grow to understand why she does what she does. You grow to feel sorry for her. And there's a lot of metaphorical things in this. I go more into detail in my review. Again, if you want to watch the review, I recommend it. But honestly, this is just a good Stephen King book. And I mean, that's like a good Stephen King book. There's a million of them. But it was one that I really, really liked. I felt that it was new-ish territory for him. There were still a lot of tropes that were kind of indicative of him as a writer. But I'm like, damn. And he blends so well with Richard Chismark, by the way. You can tell it's not just King writing, but you can tell like they were just bouncing shit off each other, and it blends so well. I really, really do love this book. Number 6, Maniac McGee. This was a book that was recommended to me by my friend Chris. You know, the friend that was nice enough to watch my 2 reviews for This Man and Dangerous Magic and tell me which one was worse. So I read it, and yeah, I loved it. It was great. It's a children's book that talks about things like poverty and racism, and it's told in a way that children can relate. It won't scare them off, but it also doesn't sugarcoat it or water it down. Which I hate when people treat children like, oh, they're just a child, they're not gonna know. Don't get me wrong. I've said in some of my reviews that, oh, you know, this is called a children's book, but it might be a little too mature for children. Like, what was it? The Midwives Apprentice. I said that there were some things in it that were, you know, like sex, that I thought, for a 10-year-old, maybe not. But that doesn't mean I agree with talking down to them or watering shit down for a child. And Maniac McGee punches you right in the gut. There's a death in this book that genuinely got me teary-eyed. I was like super upset. I'm like, really? I had a feeling this guy was gonna die, but did you have to do it, Spinelli? Just, why? Number 5, A Good Distance. Now this is a book that I really liked because of the fact that all of the characters are incredibly flawed. You have Rose, who is currently suffering from the late stages of Alzheimer's, and you learn about how she really wasn't that good of a person. She was kind of a shit parent. But then her daughter is also kind of a shit person too, who, even though there were times that her mother was trying to be a decent parent, she would always just screw her mom over and mistreat her. There were a lot of problems. And then when she gets the chance to take care of her mother to kind of make up for all the hell she put her mom through, she jumps at the chance without caring about how it'll affect her family. All of the characters in this are flawed, but relatable. It's a lot like I Am Madam X, which was on my top 5 best of 2017 list. Madam X was a flawed character. She's kind of self-absorbed, very vain. But when shit happened to her, you felt sorry, because due to her flaws and imperfections, she just felt more real. Number 4, Fable, Blood of Heroes. So I said this in the review, but I'm a huge fan of the Fable series. I know it's not the best series, and I know that I'm in the minority when I say my favorite is Fable 3, because apparently, according to the Fable fanbase, that thing's like next to Satan. But Fable Blood of Heroes is a perfect example of taking a video game and adapting it into another work and doing it well. Now, it's not based on any of the games, it's just within the same universe. About 8 different heroes that have to thwart this evil witch lady, and there's a lot of very Fable-esque comedy sprinkled throughout. It's very well written. The townspeople in this are hilarious. It's just all of that Monty Python-esque type of humor that was in Fable is transferred so well here. The characters can be a little one-dimensional, which was my top complaint about the book when I reviewed it, but not enough to take away the charm and the great writing that was basically throughout this book. I can't talk, if you hadn't noticed. That's a good way to put it, right? Basically throughout? Basically. Whatever. Anyway, great book. There's also apparently other Fable books written by other authors, so I'll probably look into that eventually. Number 3. Asher, My Son. Alright, so there was this person that I knew in school that he'd been through a lot. He and his wife lost their child. It was a stillbirth. And he decided to write a book that covered that the year after their son died and the sorrow that they went through, how they learned to heal, and eventually deciding to try again for another child. He offered to send me a copy. When I reached out and offered to review it, he mailed me a copy of the book, and it was fantastic. I was kind of scared, though, because I'm like, please be good, because I'm honor bound that if a book's bad, I'm going to say it's bad. But luckily, it was fantastic. I never once doubted that it would be anything but great. But there's always that little fear in the back of my head. And I am glad to say that since the posting of the review, he and his wife have since had another child, and they're one of those parents that post stuff all the time about their kid, like pictures, and it's adorable. Their kid's adorable. I'm so happy for them. And I really hope that his book sells more and more. I'd love to see this thing become a New York Times bestseller. It really deserves it. Number 2, Luring a Lady. So I think Nora Roberts has been on every single list this year. And I've only read like 2 of her books. It's just, that shows how much of a wishy-washy kind of writer she is. I've read 2 of her books this year, and one of these books was the best that I've read on this channel, and the other was a complete abomination pile of shit. Luckily, Luring a Lady is fantastic. It was the first review on this channel to get an A+. It takes very common romantic tropes, and it plays with them, it toys with them. And one thing I really like is just how mature and relatable the characters are. You care about what happens between the 2 leads. You understand the issues that the female lead has with her mom and with her ex-husband. And, you know, this is a woman who grew up in a rich family where women were bred to just be wives. And she's trying very, very hard to run her grandfather's company. And everyone's like, oh, just give up and let a man do it. And she's like, how about no? How about I do everything that a man does and work for my keep instead of just laying down and letting the husband take care of it? And don't get me wrong, the characters do get angry, they do bitch, they do complain, but there's reasons behind it. This isn't Tess Court levels of bitchy where she's just a cunt who refuses to cooperate and then throws a tantrum when shit gets bad because of it. Luring a Lady, I've said, is probably Nora Roberts' best book to date, and I'm kind of divided on that because I think of The Last Honest Woman, and of the 2, I think I'd read The Last Honest Woman first before Luring a Lady again, but that doesn't change the fact that it's still a fantastic book, and it deserved the A+ that it got. And then finally, my number 1 best book of 2018 is The Midwives' Apprentice. I read this 7-8 months ago, and nothing's topped it. This is, in my opinion, one of the best books I've ever read. It's just the way it's written, the character, the female lead, she starts out in literal shit. She's hiding in a dung pile to keep warm, and this midwife takes her in, and this midwife's kind of a hard bitch. She's kind of bitchy. Instead of it being a story, it's several different incidents that help shape and develop the female lead from being this poor child that was desperate and very timid to a very confident young woman who is willing to put her foot down, say what she wants, and do whatever she has to survive. And I love it. I loved this book. It was very short. It's a very short book. I read it in about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I said it in the review. There are some things in this novel that might not be suitable for young children. Like, for instance, there's one scene where they catch 2 younger people having sex in a barn. The author makes a joke about how someone, they could have had their hand cut off for stealing, but they didn't do that. The way I see it is, if you've had the talk with your children when it comes to sex, this book should be okay for them to read. Otherwise, I'd say it's less of a book for young children and more of a book for adolescent age children. Regardless, it's also one of those books that anyone of any age, once you get to that adolescent onward can read it and enjoy it, and I did immensely. It deserved the A+ I gave it. I absolutely loved it. I will read it again and again. I've already read it 2 more times since the review, and I will continue to read it because, as I said, I really fucking loved this book. So that's it, my top 10 favorite of this year. I want to thank you guys for watching. It's been a rough year, but I do look forward to 2019. I don't have any New Year's resolutions. I don't do that stupid shit. Because if you make it a resolution, more often than not, you're not gonna fucking do it. Nobody does anything New Year's resolution planned. I can't talk. Nobody does their New Year's resolution, is what I'm saying. I think like 10% of people that are like, I'm gonna do this, actually do that. I mean, I made plans to read all of the Twilight books, but that wasn't a resolution. It was more of a, I've really got to get to that. So, yeah. I'm going to take a little bit of a break. I'll be back probably around mid-January with brand new reviews. I also have new things I'm going to try. I'm not going to tell you what quite yet. You'll know when I upload it. But regardless, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching.